Langston Reid entered Jefferson High a little after 7 a.m., just like he did every weekday for the last 6 years. The halls were still wrapped in that quiet stillness that clings to a building before the day begins. He moved slowly, mop handle balanced over one shoulder, a ring of keys clipped to his belt loop tapping with each step. He didn't wear a name tag, didn't need one. Everyone knew who he was, not because he was loud, not because he made himself important, but because Langston Reid had a way of being noticed without ever trying. His boots squeaked once against the freshly waxed floor, and he paused at the edge of the math wing, a hallway that still made something tighten in his chest. Not fear, not quite regret, something heavier, a memory maybe, or the ghost of one. From down the hall, a voice rang out, sharp, dry, almost performative. Well, Mr. Reid, early bird as always. It was Principal Hargrove, navy blazer, matching tie, that permanent look like he'd just smelled something unpleasant. Langston nodded, polite as always. Morning, sir. Tell me, Reid, you ever dabble in calculus? He chuckled, loud enough to bounce off lockers. We've got a problem up on the board that stumped half the seniors. Thought you might want a shot at it. It wasn't a real question, the kind of thing said loud enough for everyone to hear, just to make someone feel small. A few students nearby laughed, not harshly, but enough. A chuckle here, a smirk there. A girl nudged her friend, whispering something neither of them would repeat if asked. Langston didn't flinch, didn't even change expression. He just looked at the board. The equation wasn't easy. Partial derivatives. A multivariable expression with a trick tucked inside. He knew it before the chalk even touched the slate, knew the answer, knew the method. Because long before Langston Reid held a mop, he held lectures. Long before he walked through side doors with his head down, he walked across stages with a doctorate pinned to his chest. But none of them knew that. Not here. And truthfully, he didn't need them to. He turned back to Hargrove with that same calm, level voice. Wouldn't want to embarrass the curriculum, sir. Then he smiled, just a little, and kept mopping. Langston Reid didn't expect to be called back. He never was. But something about the silence that followed his reply, that thin, stretched hush after, wouldn't want to embarrass the curriculum, sir, clung to the hallway longer than usual. Principal Hargrove cleared his throat. Come on now, he said, louder this time, facing the class that had started to crowd toward the doorway. We're all friends here. Just having a little fun. But there was tension under the grin. A flicker of something nervous behind his smile. Langston had brushed too close to truth, and everyone felt it. Mr. Crane, the AP calculus teacher, stepped out of the room, holding his coffee and looking amused. Actually, he said, let's let him try. If he's willing. Langston glanced toward the classroom. 20-some seniors, some standing, some slouched, some smirking. One boy at the front desk had his phone up, already recording. Langston could have walked away. Should have. He didn't. He stepped inside without a word. Not for validation, not to prove anything, but because something about this moment, it didn't belong to Hargrove anymore. It belonged to the quiet kids in the back who never raised their hands, the ones told to speak properly, the ones who'd been laughed at for asking the wrong questions with the right heart. Langston walked to the board. He didn't pause, didn't second-guess. The chalk hit the board with a crisp tap. First derivative with respect to x, then y, combine, simplify, clean, precise, fluid, like breathing. Some students had stopped filming, some leaned forward. No one laughed. He capped the solution with a double underline, put the chalk down, turned. That's your answer. And then he walked out, back to his mop bucket, his rolling cart, the quiet job no one thanked him for. But something stayed behind in that classroom, a crack in the way they'd seen him. A silence that didn't come from mockery or boredom this time, but respect. And Principal Hargrove? He hadn't said a word since Langston picked up the chalk. Langston Reid dipped the mop into the soapy bucket, same as always. He moved with that quiet rhythm he'd carried for years, efficient, unbothered, unseen. But down the hall, In the room he'd just walked out of, students were still whispering his name like they weren't sure they had the right to say it. He didn't look back, didn't need to, because something had shifted, and even if no one said it yet, he wasn't invisible anymore. The bell rang. Students spilled into the hallway, laughter and chatter mixing with the usual shuffle of sneakers. But one kid, Miles Jr., 17, stayed behind, holding his phone up, still recording. Before hitting post, he typed a caption. "The janitor just solved my AP Calc problem in under a minute." Then added a single emoji, mind blown. By second period, the video had made its way into every student group chat. By lunch, it was on Reddit. By 3 p.m., a local college meme page reposted it with the title, "Legend," and he didn't even blink. That evening, Assistant Principal Navarro got the same clip sent to him by 3 different students. He forwarded it to Hargrove with a simple subject line, "You need to see this." Hargrove didn't respond right away. When he finally did, it was dismissive. People overreact to everything online. Let it fade. But even he watched it, twice, and something about the way Langston had moved, the way the chalk had danced across the board, the silence that followed. It lingered. Then came the tweet. Late that night, someone from a nearby university, an engineering major, retweeted the clip and added, "Wait, that's Dr. Langston Reid? He taught my freshman calc class at Howard. Man is a legend." And that's when the story stopped being a moment and started becoming a movement. By morning, it had passed 20,000 views. Not just a viral school moment, not just a quirky janitor anecdote. Now people were asking questions. Who was this man? Why was he mopping floors when he clearly had a mind that belonged in lecture halls? And perhaps more importantly, who let him fade into silence? Langston Reid arrived at work that morning like always. Coffee in a thermos, keys on his hip, quiet in his step. He didn't check Twitter, didn't follow the mentions, didn't read the comments under the now multi-platform clip. But the world had already shifted around him. As he passed the main office, 2 teachers glanced up. One whispered, the other just stared. In the cafeteria, a senior who never once made eye contact with Langston suddenly stood to open the staff door for him. By 10 a.m., a reporter from the local paper was waiting in the front office with a notebook and a recorder. "Just want a few words, Mr. Reid. You've become something of an internet icon overnight." Langston looked him in the eye. "I came here to clean your floors, not your headlines," and he walked away. But the story wasn't letting go. Later that afternoon, a letter arrived at the front desk, hand-delivered, Howard University letterhead, inside, a brief note. "It was an honor learning from you, Dr. Reid. We never forgot. The world might have turned away, but your students never did." It was signed by the chair of the mathematics department. Principal Hargrove stared at the letter for a full minute, not because he didn't understand it, but because he did. In Langston's file, there was no doctorate, no mention of a teaching history, just a 1-page resume from 6 years ago. Previous employment, independent tutoring, private consulting, groundskeeping. No universities, no accolades, no flags. It was like Langston Reid had scrubbed himself clean. And in a way he had. Because years ago, after testifying against discriminatory hiring practices at a tenured university, Langston had been quietly let go. No lawsuit, no press. Just doors that stopped opening. And when doors stop opening, sometimes you walk through a different one. He walked into Jefferson High with a mop and a silence no one ever questioned. Until now. That night, Langston sat on the back steps of the school, just past midnight, his hands wrapped around that old thermos. The building behind him was dark, but in the distance, the city buzzed, still alive, still watching. He hadn't asked for any of this. But maybe he wouldn't run from it either. By Wednesday morning, the school was buzzing, but not in the way it usually did. It wasn't the seniors gossiping about prom. It wasn't the freshmen stumbling into the wrong class. It was teachers speaking in half sentences, administrators glancing at closed office doors, and faculty group chats that hadn't been this active since budget season. And at the center of it all, silently, without raising his voice or lifting a finger, Langston Reid. The video had now crossed 1.3 million views. 3 universities had reposted it, 2 podcasts had reached out for interviews, and 1 national news producer had called the school directly, asking for comment on the brilliant janitor with the doctorate no one mentioned. Principal Hargrove was sweating, literally. His collar itched, his inbox was full, and worst of all, he had been asked to submit a statement, not to the media, to the school board. In a closed-door meeting with Assistant Principal Navarro and the school's legal advisor, Hargrove tried to spin it. We weren't hiding anything. He never listed those credentials. Navarro was quiet for a moment. But you knew, didn't you? Hargrove looked up. His face shifted. Not denial, not guilt, but strategy. He didn't want to be known for it. That's what he said. That's not what he said. That's what you were comfortable believing. Navarro wasn't angry. He was tired. Tired of watching brilliance get buried beneath arrogance. Tired of seeing soft racism disguised as protocol. Tired of silence being called professionalism. Elsewhere in the building, students started to whisper questions they hadn't dared to ask before. Why is he a janitor? Did they push him out? Why didn't anyone ever tell us he was a professor? One sophomore even printed out the screenshot of Langston's equation and pinned it to the hallway bulletin board with a single title above it. Mr. Reid's Lesson 1, Never Assume. By lunchtime, the janitor's closet had a line, 3 students, 2 teachers, and a guidance counselor, just standing there awkwardly, hoping he'd open the door and talk. He didn't. He was working, because that's what he did. But the pressure had shifted now. No longer on the man with the mop. It was on the people who pretended they'd never seen the shine under his shoes. On the ones who called him sir to his face, but the help behind closed doors. And for the first time in a long time, Langston Reid was not being asked to explain himself. They were. Langston Reid had been offered coffee 5 times before first period, from teachers who'd never said more than a nod, from students who once called him Mop Man. Even from the front desk receptionist, who usually handed him trash bags without eye contact. He declined every cup. Not out of rudeness, but because he knew the flavor behind the offers. They didn't taste like respect. They tasted like guilt. By noon, 2 news vans were parked across the street from the school. An intern from a morning show emailed the district, asking if Mr. Reid would be available for an uplifting segment. A local city council member publicly invited him to speak at a leadership summit, and the superintendent had called twice. Principal Hargrove tried to seize the moment. He told the media, "We're proud to have Mr. Reid on staff. His brilliance has clearly left a mark on our students." He even called a quick staff meeting to brainstorm how to leverage the attention for positive optics. But when Navarro mentioned they might formally promote Langston to a student engagement liaison, Hargrove grinned. "Perfect. Let's announce it before he says no." That afternoon, in a dim hallway outside the supply room, Langston stood silently reading a letter in his hand. It was from the superintendent. "We'd like to recognize your service publicly. A plaque, an official ceremony, perhaps even a permanent math enrichment program in your name." Langston folded the letter slowly, thoughtfully. The custodian radio buzzed at his waist. "Langston, cafeteria spill, back corner, pretty big one." He clipped the letter behind his ID, grabbed his cart, and turned without a word. Because recognition means nothing, if it only shows up after someone else tells the world you're worth seeing. Langston didn't need a plaque. He didn't need a podium. He didn't even need the apology they hadn't yet said. What he needed, what he had always needed, was for people to see him before the world told them to look. And that kind of respect doesn't come from headlines. It comes from eye contact, from truth, from time. Before Jefferson High, before the mop, before the silence. There was a lecture hall in North Carolina, rows of students, chalk in hand, and Langston Reid at the front of the room, coat unbuttoned, voice calm, breaking down the elegance of chaos theory. He didn't teach math like numbers. He taught it like music, like rhythm, like resistance. And his students remembered, not because of his resume, but because he made them feel like intelligence was not inherited. It was claimed. He never told the janitorial staff at Jefferson about where he came from. But that didn't mean the story didn't exist. It lived in archived university emails, in the minutes of a faculty hearing, in a quiet 3-paragraph press release no one paid attention to, until now. It started when Langston challenged a hiring decision. A white candidate had been promoted to tenured professor over a black colleague with a stronger academic record. Langston spoke up, not in anger, not in protest, but in numbers, in proof, in undeniable facts. If excellence doesn't look like us, then your definition of excellence is flawed. That was the line, and it echoed louder than he expected. He was warned once, then again, and then came the departmental restructuring, budget cuts, class cancellations, committee removals, a paper trail designed to fold a man in half politely, until he wasn't on the schedule, until his office was reassigned, until his emails stopped getting answered. And finally, an envelope with a thank you, and a silence that said, "We didn't fire you. You just stopped belonging here." Langston never sued, never shouted. He just left, took his diploma, his books, his dignity, and disappeared into a world that only sees value when a screen tells them to. But now his name was back in inboxes, back in faculty lounges, back on the lips of institutions that once pretended not to know how to pronounce it. And Langston Reid, he was still pushing a mop, but now they were watching. And this time, he wasn't folding. It started small. A student left a handwritten note taped to the janitor's closet door. "Thank you for proving that we're more than what they see." The next day, a second note appeared, then a third. By Friday, there were over 24, folded notebook paper, sticky notes, torn corners from spiral journals, all pressed to the gray metal like petals on a forgotten grave. No hashtags, no TikTok dances, just gratitude, private, quiet, unmistakably loud. Langston didn't take them down, didn't mention them to anyone. But each morning before his shift, he paused and read one. Not to feel admired, but to remember why silence should never mean absence. The students noticed something else too. Teachers started staying a little longer after class. The calculus instructor, Mr. Crane, began inviting students to review sessions he hadn't hosted in years. The guidance counselor updated the hallway bulletin board. Hidden geniuses don't always wear lab coats. And then there was Kiara, a junior, bright, brilliant, but terrified of her own voice. She stopped Langston in the hall between 4th and 5th period, gripping a binder to her chest. I've always liked math, but people just expect me to be the artsy one. I never thought I was allowed to be good at this." Langston didn't smile. He didn't have to. He simply looked her in the eyes and said, "You don't need permission to be exceptional." That one sentence hit harder than any applause ever could. Later that week, Kiara started an after-school tutoring circle for girls who felt like their questions annoyed teachers. She named it the Reid Table. And when Langston walked past room 312 that Thursday and saw 8 girls solving problems on whiteboards, coaching each other, clapping at small breakthroughs, he didn't interrupt. He just stood in the doorway and watched. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't the only one who knew how to show up quietly and still leave a mark. The email came late. Subject line: "Dr. Reid, is that really you?" Langston almost deleted it. Like so many messages with vague subjects, unknown senders, and too much hope in their tone. But something in that ellipsis felt different, tentative. Real. He clicked. "Dr. Reid, my name is Darian Cole. I was in your Calc 2 class at Howard in 2006. You probably don't remember me. I sat in the 3rd row, always late, always hungry, and somehow always one step behind everyone else. But you stayed after class with me, every week. You even bought me a sandwich once without saying anything. I never said thank you. I was too embarrassed, too angry at the world. Today, I run a STEM nonprofit for low-income schools in Chicago. When I saw that video, I swear, I froze. I never forgot your voice, the way you made math feel like something I already knew, deep down. If there's any way I can help you now, your students, your school, I owe you more than I can put into words. With gratitude and deep respect, Darian. Langston read it once, then again, then leaned back in the stiff metal chair in the break room, blinking hard as if the fluorescent lights had just gotten a little brighter. He remembered Darian, not by his grades, not by the seat he sat in, but by the way he clenched his jaw when he felt stupid, the way he gripped his pencil too tight, the way he flinched every time someone laughed during class discussions. Langston hadn't saved him, but maybe he'd given him just enough light to keep walking. By the end of the week, Darian had sent a care package to the school, notebooks, graphing calculators, scholarships for 3 students to attend his STEM summer camp in Chicago. No press, no post, just quiet impact. Langston watched as Kiara unboxed one of the calculators, cradling it like a trophy. "They donated all this for us," she whispered. Langston just nodded. "No," he said. "They donated it because of you." But something deeper stirred in Langston's chest. If one voice remembered him, how many others had he taught who never got the chance to say it out loud? How many minds had he touched, then tucked away beneath layers of silence and survival? And what if, just what if, it was time to stop hiding altogether? On Monday morning, a black SUV pulled into the staff parking lot, polished, silent, out of place. A man in a tailored gray suit stepped out, phone in one hand, portfolio in the other. He didn't look lost. He looked scheduled. Principal Hargrove greeted him personally, smiling too much, standing too straight. "Mr. Reid's in the West Wing. He just finished up with the cafeteria floor." "Perfect," said the man. "Let's make history." Langston was in the supply closet when the knock came. He didn't jump. He never did. But something in the rhythm of it felt different. When he opened the door, the man extended his hand before even introducing himself. "Langston Reid. My name's Leonard Parks. I'm with Vista Education Media. We've been following your story." Langston didn't shake. He just looked at the man's suit, his perfect teeth, his eager eyes. "I'm not interested in interviews." "This isn't just an interview. It's a series, a docu-feature. Voices in silence. You'd be the pilot episode." Langston raised an eyebrow. "A what?" "A 10-part digital campaign showcasing unsung heroes in education. We already pitched it to 2 platforms. They love you. You're the perfect start. Humble beginnings, buried genius, systemic injustice, quiet victory. It's got everything." Langston paused. "You want the janitor who solved the math problem. We want the man who made the world stop and listen." Langston nodded slowly. "No, you want the myth, not the man who's still cleaning vomit off the boys' bathroom floor." Leonard blinked. "Look, we can pay. There's a speaking circuit too. TEDx, conferences, even university panels. You'd have a platform. You deserve that." Langston leaned against the doorway. "Where were those platforms when I was writing papers no one cited? When I was denied tenure for speaking up? When I took this job and nobody asked why a professor was cleaning floors?" Leonard cleared his throat. "Times are changing." Langston's stare didn't budge. "No, people are watching. That's not the same thing." Later that day, the front office staff passed around a flyer mock-up, Langston's photo, mid-speech, pasted above the words, "From janitor to genius, the story of redemption." He wasn't even holding a mop, just standing, smiling, sanitized. He folded the paper once, then again, then dropped it into the trash, because Langston Reid didn't need to be rebranded. He needed to be remembered exactly as he was, not palatable, not polished, but real. Langston didn't return calls, didn't respond to the media, didn't sit for interviews, but he showed up at room 109 after school, the unused AV room with flickering lights and broken blinds, and he propped the door open with a mop handle. Inside, he pushed 2 desks together, cleared off a stack of old projector slides, and taped a piece of paper to the door. For the ones who still have questions, that's it. No flyers, no announcements, no hashtags, just that sentence. And by the end of the week, there weren't enough chairs. The first to walk in was Kiara, then Marcus, the quiet kid who scribbled formulas on napkins during lunch. Then Sonia, who never said a word in math class but always aced the tests. No permission slips, no curriculum. Langston stood at the front of the room, not as a teacher, not as a savior, but as a reminder. "We're not starting with calculus," he said. "We're starting with the belief that you belong in this room." And the silence that followed was the kind that rewires a person. Word spread. Students came early, stayed late. Even the ones who hated math started asking to watch. Not because the problems were easy, but because someone finally told them they could. One afternoon, Kiara lingered after everyone had left. "Why are you doing this? You could be famous right now, making money, traveling." Langston looked up from the notes he was organizing. "Fame teaches people to watch you. This," he gestured to the room, "teaches them to replace you." Principal Hargrove came by once, stood at the door, didn't enter. He watched the students work, brows furrowed, voices confident. They weren't afraid of being wrong anymore, because Langston never praised answers, he praised process. Hargrove cleared his throat. "We've had interest from the board. They want to sponsor this as an official program." Langston didn't look up. "Tell them to fund it, but don't name it after me." "Why not?" Langston finally met his eyes. "Because if it's about me, it dies when I leave. If it's about them, it lives long after I'm gone." That night, someone wrote 3 words across the whiteboard before leaving. "This room breathes." And for the first time in years, so did Langston. It didn't happen overnight. There was no ribbon cutting, no spotlight, no commemorative plaque. But somewhere between week 3 and week 6, something changed. The students stopped asking Langston what to do, and started telling each other. Kiara took over warm-ups on Tuesdays. Marcus handled the whiteboard walkthroughs. Sonia printed out her own problem sets and brought extra copies. They didn't call it a club, didn't give it a catchy name. It was just after school with Mr. Reid. Except Mr. Reid didn't talk much anymore. He watched, and that's how he knew it was working. One afternoon, as rain tapped lightly against the windows and the room buzzed with quiet problem-solving, Kiara stood up and walked over to where Langston was cleaning a smudge off the glass. "Can I ask you something real?" He nodded. "What happens if you leave?" Langston took a moment, wiped a bit more, then turned. "If I've done this right, nothing." She frowned. "But you started all this." "No," he said gently. "I just reminded you it was already in you." That night, Kiara wrote something at the bottom corner of the board, smaller than usual. "We thought we needed permission. Turns out we just needed proof." The next week, Langston didn't show up on Monday, or Tuesday. By Wednesday, whispers started. By Thursday, Mr. Crane confirmed it. Langston had turned in his resignation. He left no note, no speech, just his keys on the desk and a stack of folders labeled, "For whoever keeps this going." Inside were lesson plans, handwritten notes, names of students he thought could lead next. He didn't ask, he just trusted. The room was full on Friday, even more than usual. No Langston, no mop handle holding the door open. Just a silent whiteboard and a pile of notebooks. For a moment, no one moved. And then Kiara got up, picked up a marker, and wrote, "Today we teach each other." Over the next few weeks, something even more remarkable happened. Langston's name stopped being the point, his presence stopped being required. And yet, his spirit was everywhere. On the lockers, where students now taped encouraging notes to one another. In the cafeteria, where peer tutoring tables became a regular sight. In the main office, where a folder sat on the counter with extra Reid-created problem sets anyone could take home. No logo, no funding, no teacher in charge, just momentum. Months passed. Then one day, a student none of them had met walked into room 109. Nervous, quiet, said he was bad at math. Kiara smiled. So were we. Sit down, we'll show you. That weekend, in a small apartment 2 cities away, Langston Reid sat at a kitchen table with his thermos in hand, flipping through a letter, handwritten, no return address, just 2 words at the bottom. It lives. He smiled, not wide, not proud, just enough to say it was worth it. Then he took a sip of coffee, leaned back, and exhaled. The kind of breath you only take when something you planted has finally grown roots. He didn't leave a statue behind, or a TED Talk, or a foundation in his name, but he left a room that breathes. And sometimes, that's enough to change the world.